Hello, how are you? It's Friday. I hope you've had a good week. I hope if you've been at Spring Harvest at home, you've enjoyed it. And hopefully I can share a bit with you today for our Stanway Evangelical Church blog on obedience. So, obedience, what does it mean? What's it all about? And why are we so keen to not be obedient? Well, I looked up the word, and it means the act of obeying, dutiful or submissive behaviour. And I think that word submissive is where it often becomes misunderstood. It's why it's often referred to as a term removed from wedding vows, because people are very defiant in being submissive. And I think actually that's hugely misunderstood, and maybe for another vlog. I read a quote by George Farquhar that said, "They who know the least obey the best." And I think when we know very little about God's plan, it's very easy for us to obey and to trust in him and have faith. We weren't made to know all of God's plan and what will become of things as time goes by. And that's what makes it easy for us to say, yes, we want to obey God and be dutiful and maybe even submissive. Paul told Timothy that disobedience would be a sign of end times. Disobedience is referred to in the Bible 13 times, twice in the Old Testament and 11 times in the New Testament. Whereas obedience, or obey is mentioned 69 times across 66 verses, 44 times in the Old Testament and 25 times in the New Testament. The word obedience appears 16 times in 16 verses. I think the fact that it's mentioned so much, it points out that it is really, really important to be obedient to God. And it often starts with us as adults and parents and mentors within the church. And if we can't be obedient to God and to God's word, then how do we expect our children to grow up to be able to be obedient to us, but also obedient to God and God's word? Because in everything we do, we set the example. So I was kind of thinking about my own experience of obedience, and quite inspired by Kim and Ian speaking yesterday. I just wanted to share a little bit of our testimony. So many of you will know our son Joseph. We'd had Chloe, she is just coming up for 14, and we were desperate to have a second child, and we really wanted 9 months between them. So we started planning for a second baby. We had 2 miscarriages along the journey, and we'd got to the point where we were tired and scared, and beginning to think that it would just never happen. There'd been a lot of heartbreak for years. Every month we would get our hopes up that we might be pregnant, and then every month we'd be hit with disappointment and heartbreak because we weren't, or we'd find we were and then followed through with a miscarriage within the first 3 months. And we got to the point where it was 4 years, and we'd said to each other, look, we can't go on like this. This is causing us too much heartbreak and it's affecting us. So we decided to pray separately rather than together, that we would ask God to reveal his will to us, that if it wasn't his will for us to have another child, then we'd stop trying and one of us would be sterilised. Which seems quite drastic, but we didn't want to risk the possibility of having to go through more heartbreak unnecessarily if it wasn't God's will. So we started praying. It was October 2010, September 2010, somewhere around there, September, October. And we didn't mention to anyone that this was what we were planning. We didn't plan to talk to each other about it until the end of the month. So we started praying. Within the first couple of days of praying, we went to home group. And some of you might know Christine and Mike that go to Stanway Evangelical occasionally. They were in our home group at the time, along with Frank and Vicky Saunders, Hannah and Paul Mulvey, and ourselves. And we were just praying within our home group, and something that someone prayed, amongst all the other words just got lost. But these few words just hit me in my thoughts. And the words were, everything happens in God's timing. And that was my first bit of hope, is that it happens in God's timing. I didn't send them to Steve because we'd agreed not to discuss it. That night I woke up in the middle of the night, I think it was about 2 o'clock in the morning, to what sounded like someone knocking on my bedside table, just like 3 little knocks. And I woke up and I was absolutely certain I'd heard it. Steve was sound asleep, so I laid down and went back to sleep. It happened again the next night, 3 knocks, 2 o'clock in the morning. Sounded like someone knocking on wood on my bedside cabinet. On the 3rd night, I was woken by the knocks again, quite sleepy, and as I woke from my sleep, I heard a voice, a very clear, loud voice that said, if you want a baby, now is the time. What do you do with that? What do you do? I nudged Steve. I said, did you say something? And he was like, in his sleep. And I could only be obedient to that. So still, next day, didn't say anything to Steve as to why I'd kind of woken him in the middle of the night. And I still didn't say anything for the next couple of weeks, and I counted down every day for 2 weeks. And on that 2-week mark, Steve had gone to work early. He'd left at about 4 o'clock in the morning, I think it was. And I got up. I got Chloe ready for school really quickly, and we flew to Tesco's, and I got one of those pregnancy tests that says it in words, so there's no mistake. And I went into Tesco's bathrooms, and I waited for that 3 minutes, and the word pregnant popped up. So I went and bought another test, just a normal test, and I waited, and 2 blue lines popped up. So I rushed home. I dropped Chloe at school. I phoned Steve, and in some sort of garbled conversation kept going, oh my goodness, there's 2 blue lines, I think we've done it. And he was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Slow down. What are you on about? And I said, we're pregnant. I think we're pregnant. I heard God, we're pregnant. Well, the rest of the story is that here we have Joseph. We lost a baby on that journey. He was one of a twin. But at the end of the day, I was obedient when I heard God. There's been other times when I've seen obedience for God, when I've been, short of money, and God's asked me to bless someone, and I've questioned it. But my story with Joseph is the one that really strengthened my faith. Hearing God so clear in the middle of the night, and then finding I was pregnant, just blew me away. So if at any point you wonder why we need to be obedient, then it's simply so that God can bless us and can give us the best that we possibly want in life. because the least we know, the better we will obey. Thank you.